Hello everyone, I hope all of you are doing fine. When you shop online on websites such as Amazon, the basic objective that you would have is to buy a product at the lowest possible price. Now you can use various extensions to monitor the price of a product, or you can create something on your own using Python and GitHub Actions. So in today's video, I'll show you how you can scrape a website like Flipkart, which is a direct competition to Amazon in India. You can basically track the price changes for a particular product, and all of this can be automated using GitHub Actions. I've played around extensively with GitHub Actions and I'm pretty sure you would enjoy the entire video. So without wasting any further time, let's kickstart the video. In this video, I'll show you how you can extract details about the product name as well as the price of the product from Flipkart.com, which is a competing brand in India against Amazon. So if I want to really understand the pricing strategy for different products, I want to constantly monitor the price, which is where I want the script to run every 8 minutes and populate a Google Sheet, which is where I'll define a cron job. And for the cron job, I'll basically specify the frequency in which the script should execute, which is where I'm using cron tab guru, the website, and I'm customizing it at every 8 minutes. So I'm currently recording this video on 6th of August. So which is what you would see on the screen as well. So you have different intervals of time depicted in this particular cron tab job. So this entire activity would run every 8 minutes. It would kind of extract data from Flipkart's product display page, which I'll come to in the future part of the video. Post which, what I'll do is I'll put all the data into a Google Sheet, and that in turn is something that you can easily utilize for your analysis. So here, if I want everything to be executed every 8 minutes, the cron tab values that you will have to pass when you assign a cron tab job is *#8 and 4 stars corresponding to that. So you have different breakups like day, month, day, hour, minute. You can customize based on your requirements. Before I start with the actual activity, the one thing that you will have to enable before you start with the Python script is you will have to enable Google Sheets API. As you already know, the objective is to extract data from an e-commerce website like Flipkart, push that data into a Google Sheet. So in order to achieve this, what you'll have to basically do is first enable the Google Sheets API. So this is basically the site which gives you an overview of the Google Sheets API. So now when I click on Python, it will give you a quick start guide in terms of how you can basically use the API along with Python. But before you start using Google Sheets API with Python, the first thing that you will have to do is enable the Google Sheets API. So the way you should go about doing that is basically clicking on create a project and enable the API. So let me click on this. I'll go to Google Cloud Console. Here is where a default project is already created. Now the first thing that I'll do is search for Sheets. Here is your Google Sheets API. Let me click on this. So here is the Google Sheets API web page. I'll click on enable. So the API is basically active. As you can see, the disable API button as well. So in order to use the API, what you will require is basically a JSON file, which is something that I'll show you in terms of how you have to go forward and download the API. So here is where I'm creating a credential now. Which API are you using? You will basically have to fill in all the details. Click on application data. I'm not using any other Google Cloud service, so I'll say no, I'm not using them. And I'll click on next. Now I also have to create a service account in order to access the resource. So I'll type in Bhavesh G Sheet and I'll click on create and continue. I'll select a role, so I'll give myself the owner role. The reason why I'm giving an owner role right now to this particular service account is basically the account the account should have the ability of editing the sheet. So reading as well as write access is what I'm planning to give. So I'll press on next, and yes, I have the credentials ready. So now when I click on credentials, you can see a service account associated with the API. So what I'll do next is I'll basically download the JSON file, which will contain a private key, and this is something that I'll use when I make a call from Python to Google Sheet API. In order to do that for a particular service account, you have to click on manage keys. Then you also have to click on add key, and then you have to press on create new key. Now I want a JSON file, which is what I'm selecting right now, and I basically have my JSON file ready. Once the data has been extracted from an e-commerce website, what we basically intend to do is basically push all of that into a Google Sheet. In order for the service account to make a modification in a Google Sheet, what I'll have to do is I'll have to give edit access to the service account that we've just created, and that is something that is extremely important in the entire workflow. So when you create a Google Sheet in which you want to push the data into, you will have to give edit access to that particular service account that you've created. So in our case, we have Bhavesh gsheet @speedy area something. So this is something that you have to give edit access to. Then the entire solution would work really smoothly. Okay. So keep this in mind when you create your own solution as well. Before I jump and show you actual Python code in terms of how data extraction will happen, firstly I want to show you from which website am I downloading data, what product am I interested in, and how basically I'll go about the entire activity. So I'm basically fond of the Pixel series. So here is the new launch in India, which is Google Pixel 6a. So I want to extract the name of the product, which is Google Pixel 6a, and I also want to basically extract the price, which in Indian currency is 43,999. So this is something that I plan to extract. So the way I would go about doing this is basically I'll right click on the element that I want to extract, press on inspect, and automatically it will show me a class. Like in the case of the name, you have the class equal to b_nuci. So this is something that I'll reference for this particular website to extract the name of the product. Similarly, when I select the price, which is 43,999, I'll have a different class. In this case, the class is _30jeq3 space _16j and the following characters that are there after that. So these are the two values that I'll be utilizing to extract the name of the product as well as the price of the product. Now let me show you the Python code for the entire exercise. In order to validate that the first run that I'll have will be a correct run, I'll basically execute the entire activity in first Google Colab, post which the entire activity would be taken care using GitHub Actions. Okay, so I'll require a basic library like PyGSheets. So that is something that I'll require, which is something that you can utilize to access the Sheets API. We've already downloaded the JSON file, which is something that you see on the left hand side, which is PD, area, and some numbers following that. So this is something that I've already uploaded. Now let me go forward and install PyGSheets. Now the installation is complete. I require some basic modules like the OS module, the regular expression modules, a request module to basically extract the data from an HTML site. I require pandas, I require PyGSheets. I also require the Unicode library for some data cleaning. And I have beautiful soup, date time, and again time zone to basically output a time value in my time zone. So this is where I've used this particular function. I'll go forward and execute this cell as well. Now what I've done next is basically I've created a function to extract the price and product details or product name from the Flipkart website. So I will basically pass in URL of the site that I want to extract data from in the input section. And I'll now walk you through each and every line of code in this function so that you have a fair sense in terms of what I'm doing. So in the first line of the code, I basically call the get function from the request library, pass in the URL, and I save the entire response into a variable called as request. I pass the content from this request that has come, it's basically a response. So this content from the response is what I'm passing through the beautiful soup HTML parser. And I have everything in place, which is something that I'll utilize to extract the classes that I've just showed you in the previous part of the video. So that is saved into a variable soup. Now if you recollect, I want to extract the name of the product, which is where the class name, which is b_nuci, comes into picture, which is what I'm doing using the soup.find function. So I'm calling the soup.find function. I wanted to find a span which contains a class, and I've provided it with a class name that I want to basically extract. Once I've done that, I also call the function get_text to extract the text value. There are some Unicode values that jump in, which is what I want to normalize using the Unicode data.normalize function. The next thing that I also want to extract is the price, which is where a new class comes in. I only want the integer values, I don't want the floating values. I don't want this to be a string, which is what I've done in the next line of code. Finally, I also want to understand what time have I extracted the data, which is where time_now variable comes into picture. Finally, I've extracted the three most important features that I want in the entire activity, which is the actual product name, the product price, and what time have I extracted the data from that particular website. If this idea is clear, let's go forward. The first variable that I create is path. Path basically signifies the actual path of the JSON file that contains my linkage or the private key through which I can access the Google Sheet API. Google Sheet ID is basically a unique identifier for every Google Sheet. So if you just Google it, you would basically understand what a Google Sheet ID is. The next variable is URL. So here for this entire activity, I've kept just one URL, but you can scrape through multiple URLs and you can monitor multiple say products at once. But for this particular activity, I've just kept it as a single value, which is the Google Pixel 6a that I want to basically extract data from. Next, I create a variable called as GC, which is where I kind of authorize PyG Sheets to access Google Sheets that I've kind of linked above using the sheet ID. But I've passed in my credentials, which is in form of a JSON file. Once the authorization is successful, then using the key that I've supplied, which is in the sheet ID, I'll be able to access the Google Sheet that I want to access. So this is that simple part of the code, nothing complex. All you require is the actual private key JSON file, your sheet ID, the URL that you want to scrape, and rest is all about authorization as well as extraction of that particular Google Sheet. If this is clear, I will now go forward and show you what Google Sheet am I using. So this is the Google Sheet, it's entirely empty right now. So now I'll basically execute the function extract_Flipkart_price. I'll pass in the URL, and output would be a list containing the product name, product price, and the time of execution. So this list is something that I pass into a data frame called as df. So this data frame is something that I'll use either to add entirely into the Google Sheet, which is something that is blank. If it's already filled by previous values, then the values would be appended. This is something that I kind of carry out with the next piece of code. When I look at the Google Sheet, this is the output. So the first time that I execute the entire process, I have the value of product, price, and date time. So the script is working perfectly fine. It's the first run, so it's not basically going into the else statement where it has to append something. It's basically pushing the entire newly created data frame into a Google Sheet. When we go to GitHub Actions, it is here that you will see the magic of GitHub Actions coming into picture. So Now that I've validated that the entire script is working perfectly fine, and this is something that I want to execute using, say, GitHub Actions, I will go forward and download this Python notebook in form of a Python script. So the way I would do that is file, download, and I will download the .py file. So I'll go to GitHub, I'll create a private repository. The reason why I'm creating a private repository is because I plan to upload the JSON file of the Google Sheet API access. So this is something that you will have to be careful about. You cannot expose your JSON file in a public repository. So I've created a private repository, and again, this is more for a introductory video purpose, which is where I thought it's the right way to, say, upload the entire JSON file in form of a private repository. You can create environment variables, fetch data from there, but again, I wanted to keep this entire activity very simple. So I create a private repository with the name of fk-scraper-github-actions. I upload 3 files: fk_scraper.py, requirements.txt, and the JSON file which gives me access to the Sheets API. So let me commit the changes. So what does requirements.txt file contain? So when GitHub Actions basically executes, it will require some set of dependencies to be installed in the Python session, which is where you would require, say, different libraries to execute this entire process, which is where I'll require request auth library, pytz, pandas, beautiful soup, pygSheets, and regular expressions. So these are some of the libraries that I wanted in the entire activity, and this is something that I've kind of supplied in the requirements.txt file. Now I've uploaded most of the files. You would be wondering, where is GitHub Actions coming into picture? Well, if you've stayed this long, here is where magic starts happening. So I click on Actions, the tab, and here you have different workflows that have been demonstrated. So you have Python package using Anaconda, publish Python package, and so on and so forth. I'll pick the last one, which is Python package. So let me click on that. So the entire workflow that you see looks to be a bit complex. So I have my own simplified version of the entire workflow that you should basically use. So if you have more complex workflows, you can basically use that. But given this is more of a beginner activity or a beginner video, I wanted to give you like the most simplest backbone version of the YAML file that you have to create. So what you basically have to do is create a YAML file, pass in the name, enter a schedule. So you have the cron job. So if you remember the first part of the video, I showed you what I want out of this cron job. So I want to execute this script every 8 minutes. So that is something that I've specified here. I have defined jobs. So scrape latest is basically running on Ubuntu. I also define the steps that what I have to check out. Then I also have to set up Python. Which version of Python do I want is also something that I've specified. The next execution of the entire action would be to install all the requirements that are required. So pip install -r requirements.txt. Finally, the scraper would run and the entire execution would happen, and the results would be published into a Google Sheet. This is like the bare minimum skeleton that I've given you. Now what I do is I pick the entire YAML file and I paste the contents into this edit section, and I press on start commit. Once I press on start commit, there is a new file that has appeared, which is python-package.yaml. I go to actions again, and now it shows me a workflow, and the workflow name is scrape. So let me go forward and press scrape. Now here it says this workflow has a workflow_dispatch event trigger. So now I click on run workflow, and I again click on run workflow. So here is where the execution starts. So as you can clearly see, it's kind of installing all the dependencies. it's running the scraper and it finally says complete job. So the entire execution has happened. Now I'll go forward and show you the Google Sheet content. So as you can clearly see, you have data that is coming in at 20:01. Let's wait for some more time. Now fast forwarding this entire video again to the next run. So as you can clearly see, the second trigger has automatically happened. So for the first time it was manually executed by me. The second time it was automatically scheduled, which is something that you see here. So our cron job is working perfectly fine and it executed exactly after 8 minutes. So things look perfectly fine. Let's now monitor the result. So now if you look at this particular Google Sheet, you have the newest entry at 2010, which is 8:10 p.m. and you have the price. So price generally remains the same for mobile phones. So you can kind of increase the frequency if you want like a more dynamic result to populate. So I've kept it say low so that I can record the video and share it across with you. Finally, if I check it after 1 hour, this is what I'm seeing right now. The entire process is running very smoothly. At the backend, every time there is a trigger after 8 minutes, the scraper runs, it extracts data from Flipkart for the particular product that I've selected. It extracts the product name and price. It runs automatically, populates a Google Sheet, and that in turn is something that you can monitor. You can also link this to a Google Data Studio dashboard that would automatically refresh after 15 minutes, and you would have like a running dashboard ready, which catches data automatically from a source, pushes it into a Google Sheet. That in turn is linked to a Data Studio dashboard. Isn't this amazing? So this is the power of GitHub Actions. Well, this is all that I had in today's video. This video was all about how you can use GitHub Actions to extract data from various websites and then create an automated pipeline that can help you extract data in a very systematic manner. I hope you found this video informative. I keep posting such videos on data science, machine learning, MLOps. So stay subscribed for more such amazing videos on data science and machine learning. Thank you so much for watching this video.